Welcome to the Body, Mind, Spirit Show with me, your host, Coach Rita Hurry. Welcome everyone to the Body, Mind, Spirit Show. Today I have a special guest. She is Catriona Amor, and she is a homeopath, nutritionist, healer, and menopause healing coach. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you so much for having me, Rita.
It's my pleasure. I'm so excited to have this interview because I feel that we're going to really help a lot of women who need this support right now. So it's really exciting to be able to have you on the show. Okay, so first of all, can you tell me about how your journey began and what made you decide to undertake this mission to help women during menopause and perimenopause?
Okay, so if we go back to the beginning, I when I had my children, so I was only 21 when I had my daughter, and she became very poorly, and doctors were not helping me, looking at me like I was didn't know what I was talking about as a 21-year-old mother. And my daughter ended up in hospital. And my mum had just happened to come across a homeopath and said, take her to this homeopath and to see if she can help. And my daughter, she took one little tiny, all I can say is like a sugar pill. And she instantly got better. Within like an hour, she was better. All the problems that she had just went. She was back to being this happy little baby. So that's where my journey into homeopathy began. And, my daughter is now 23. And, she's been to the doctors probably just a couple of times in her life just to get diagnosed, but not needed any medication. The same with my son. So my interest, that's where the interest in homeopathy or natural medicine comes from.
Yeah.
And it was actually when my father died that, it was a transition for me in my 30s that I thought to myself, right, what do I want to do? For myself, my children were growing up. I wanted something for me. And so that was it. I went off and trained for 4 years to become a homeopath.
Great.
And nutritionist. And then other actually healing modalities came in after that. But I started off, when I first started my career, I was seeing everyone, from children, men. But I tended to see either a lot of men with anxiety and depression, or women with anxiety, depression, and hormone issues. And it was that sort of started where I wanted to focus my journey. And my own symptoms, I started to notice my own symptoms at 39. My mum never talked to me. I don't know about you, Rita, but my mum never talked about hormones or periods. It was a bit of a taboo subject.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so that's where, then I decided, right, that's it. I was going to specialize in perimenopause and menopause because women just majority of women do not understand their periods, let alone what the hell is going to happen once you hit 40s, 50s. And that's where the journey really started.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like such an amazing journey. I mean, it's so beautiful to hear, obviously, your children and how homeopath. I always get stuck saying that homeopath. Okay.
Homeopathy is quite a difficult one. Yes. Yeah.
How it helped them, and in terms of the natural remedies that you can use for your body, which so many people frown upon, but has long-term positive effects. Exactly. I mean, in terms of obviously moving into talking about perimenopause and the menopause, what was it specifically? I mean, obviously, not a lot of us as women, we go through our monthly cycle and there's so much to it. But what was it about that period? Was it the fact that you were getting a lot of clients who were going through that stage? Or was it that you were intrigued as to, okay, you've seen a lot of people around you going through that stage and you feel that you can help them? What was it that was that particular area that you focused on?
It was the amount of women that were coming to me feeling unhappy, anxious, sad, not necessarily depressed. They would say they don't feel depressed, but the doctor's answer was antidepressants, and they didn't feel they needed antidepressants. Hence why they came to me as a homeopath and someone that could offer natural remedies, because they just didn't feel that they needed a chemical pill. And that was my main reason that I started to look and think, well, a lot of it is hormonal. Yes, we get to that stage of our life. Menopause particularly is a stage where, maybe your children are growing up, or you've been married or in a relationship for a long time. It tends to be when women start questioning their life anyway, 40s and 50s, and what's for me? You've put everyone else first, so now what's next for me? So it can be that, but on top of that, you're on this roller coaster of emotions because of your hormones. And I found that so many women just didn't understand that it was hormone related, and the doctors weren't recognizing that either. They were just shoving them out the door with have an antidepressant. And antidepressants, there is a huge place for medication, but I think, so many of us, we're conditioned, growing up, you're not well, you go to the doctors to get a diagnosis or a medication, whereas in other cultures they very much understand. So Western medicine's very much about taking a pill, but in other cultures it's very much about, your body can heal itself, and any symptom you have is a sign that your body's not quite happy. But you can take, whether it's homeopathy, herbs, nutrition, meditation, there are so many different modalities that can just help to bring your body back into balance if you understand what on earth's going on. And that was my main reason. So then I did much more training. I did more training courses specifically in menopause, so that I could, help women.
That's amazing. And you're definitely right there in terms of, I think sometimes we're very quick to go outside and go and see a doctor for obviously that tablet that will cure everything. But it is like sometimes our body is actually telling us things that if we really get into the practice of connecting to our body, because I'm a great believer in like the inside out method in terms of connecting within and getting to know yourself, and then you can understand also physically how your body's doing. And like you said, is it depression, or is this depression stemming from something hormonal? And you'll get to know what direction that is once you understand yourself that bit more. So definitely what you said is spot on there.
Absolutely. It's about listening. I think, as women, because we don't take that time for ourselves, and we put so much stress on our bodies, maybe we've been mothers or tried fertility and it's not worked, or we put so much pressure on our bodies that actually it's time to start listening to it. And like you say, inside out. Definitely.
So what are the symptoms that women need to be aware of to know that they're going through perimenopause?
Okay, so there is a long list, I'm afraid. And I think there are 34 recognized symptoms of perimenopause. And I would say there are many more, but the first one that doctors tend to recognize is irregular periods. So maybe you've gone from a regular monthly period of every 28 days to maybe your periods become shorter. So it may be like a 24-day cycle. Maybe you're having more than one period every month, or it could be the opposite. You may go 5-6 weeks without having a period. You may sort of need to take a pregnancy test to think, what on earth's going on with my body? So it can be that. Periods may become heavier or last for longer. So maybe a 5-day cycle changes to a 7 or a 10-day cycle, or they may become shorter. That tends to be the first symptom that a doctor as well will recognize. One of the things that I see is definitely with the moods. So low mood, sadness, anxiety, feelings of insecurity, lack of concentration, lack of confidence. They tend to be emotional symptoms that I actually start to see quite often in women late 30s. So
Right.
they can start to come in. So just always be mindful. Listen, so any women that are listening, think about, is there an exterior problem? So maybe it is a stress from work or relationship or children, but just make sure you're keeping a note of your symptoms throughout the month.
Okay.
Other things, unusual symptoms. Obviously things like skin changes, dry skin, itchy skin is an uncommon one, but some women feel as if they've got ants crawling underneath
Yeah,
their
I've
skin.
heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, a really unusual one. Other unusual ones include burning tongue, teeth issues, so bleeding teeth can be a sign of menopause. Heart palpitations, again, that's an unusual one, so you need to think about that. Always heart palpitations, get checked out, do your blood pressure, but get checked out.
Yeah.
Aches and pains, so joint aches and pains, maybe lower back pain, gaining weight. So specifically gaining weight around the tummy. And this was one of the things I noticed at 39. I was going to the gym 6 days a week, but weight was going on around my tummy. And I think, where's that coming from? I was carrying on. It could be low sex drive, vagina dryness. There are so many symptoms. So really important to know the symptoms and just keep track of anything. But I would say irregular periods and the mood changes and the weight tend to be the first ones, the most common ones that I see.
Wow. And these are things that are very closely associated with lots of other things, I mean, like definitely, like if you think about gaining weight and, around the abdominal area, I mean, that is an issue in itself for me. I always think, okay, what am I eating? What am I, not doing? And also it's easy to say, okay, well, we've been in lockdown, we've had, this pandemic, so there's been a lot of not as much activity, even though, I exercise, like you said, 6 days a week, but you're not shifting it. And then you don't click that it could be the signs of perimenopause. You just think, oh, it's maybe I'm eating too much sugar, maybe I'm this. So it's really closely connected that it is quite difficult for someone to kind of maybe think that they could be in that stage, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, Rita. And that's the thing. It is really difficult. Like you say, with the whole lockdown situation, I think everybody has put on a few pounds. But it's, it could be very much that your hormones are shifting. So you're going on this roller coaster where you might still be having a period every month, but your hormones are shifting on a daily basis. Your metabolism slowing down. That can all play a part in the weight gain. And then also stress plays a huge part. So if you've got too much cortisol, too much of the stress hormone in your body, it's going to store as fat around the tummy. So that's another reason so many people have been stressed over the last, I don't know how long now, 18 months, 2 years, just due to the lockdown and pandemic.
So if someone is actually on the contraception, obviously their periods are not like as known as real periods. They're obviously, they have their if they choose, I mean, obviously some contraceptions, you have that break and you have that bleed. Can the symptoms be recognized, obviously, because having irregular periods, like, can that occur? Will they be able to notice that, or is that a little bit more difficult for someone who is on the contraception?
It is more difficult for women that are on contraceptive, whether it's the birth control pill or the coil. It can be harder to spot the symptoms because what that's doing, it's a chemical hormone that's being put into your body, which then depletes your other hormones from working naturally. So it's going to mask your symptoms. Many women, again, don't realize that they are not actually having a proper period if they're on birth control. It is a fake bleed. So you won't know what's going on. But even so, if you're finding that you're starting to get those mood changes, or you are starting to have an unusual bleed whilst you're on contraceptives, it tends to be the mood changes that most women find start to happen if they're on birth control pill, and they're starting to see hormonal shifts.
Yeah, so that's something that those that are on contraception could look out for.
Definitely.
And take it from there. No,
yeah.
Thank you for that. Now, is there a particular age that perimenopause starts from? Because some people can start it, I've heard, as early as in their 30s. Some people can be a lot later. And then I know sometimes it can be brushed off by GPs saying, oh, well, you're not at that age yet. So what age does it actually start, or is there no particular age?
I would say there's no particular age. Doctors tend to say the perimenopause starts mid-40s, so from 45 years onwards. So just to clarify, the perimenopause is the hormonal shift before the menopause. Menopause is actually just one day. It's when you have gone a whole 12 months of no periods. The very last day of your period is your menopause, and then you are classed as postmenopause. So perimenopause is this hormonal shift that we have where all the symptoms start. So doctors tend to recognize it from 45 onwards, hence why so many women go to their GP to be told you're too young. In the UK, the average age for menopause for when periods are stopped is 51. But I would say I'm seeing a huge shift now. I'm seeing plenty of women 53, 54 still having regular periods. Yeah. And then again, I'm seeing women late 30s, early 40s whose periods have become irregular or periods have stopped. So
wow.
I don't see it is quite as clear cut as it used to be, maybe. I see women from age maybe 38, 39 starting to see some of the symptoms I mentioned, like irregular periods, moods, low sex drive, things like that. So early 40s. But then you've also got to be mindful that some women go into menopause in their teenage years. Very rare.
Wow.
But I know of a 14-year-old girl, and I met a girl last weekend, actually 21, and she's been told that she's menopausal. So post-menopause at 21. So yeah, it can be, it depends. If women have been on contraceptives, then that can change things. Sometimes if women have had children later in life, then that can bring on an earlier perimenopause. Again, women that maybe had postnatal depression or issues around having children, IVF, infertility, then of course that can all play a huge part. So there is no one size fits all. The biggest thing is women tend to go to the doctor. The doctors, unless they've done an extra training course, they don't have to, from what I could understand, GPs in the UK anyway, do not have to do menopause training. It's just it's an extra module. Hence why, and if they do, they've just spent a few hours learning it. So, and they're very medical. This is the science. There you go. And I don't feel it's quite as clear cut nowadays with the stresses and the diet and the way that we live. It's not quite as easy as it used to be. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Wow. Like there's a few things that you've said there. I'm like lost for words, especially, in terms of what you said, going back to the whole menopause journey. So am I right in saying that the whole journey of the symptoms and everything is the perimenopause stage? And then you're saying once your periods have stopped for 12 months and you've not had any periods, that is actual menopause. So that actually is shorter than what we actually believe it to be. Am I right?
Yes. This is where, it was always talked about as being the menopause. And so it's actually perimenopause is the phase before. Some women, I don't want to paint horror pictures. Some women have no symptoms or maybe just have a few symptoms. And other women will have a lot of symptoms. But this transition, it can, for some women, it can, take 10, 12 years. So that, if a woman's like late 30s, early 40s starts to see symptoms, this period can take sort of 10, 12 years. Other women, they may not have symptoms, and it may, just be a 6 months transition when they actually notice their symptoms. But the more you understand your body, the more you understand the symptoms, and the more you start to put number one on your back and start to look after your body, have some, we've got to give our bodies tender loving care at the end of the day. We've, had, put our bodies through so much. It is a little bit boring, I'm afraid. It does go back to eating well, being a little bit more mindful, taking time out, and
definitely
things like that. And the more you do start looking after your body in your 40s, the easier the transition should be.
I mean, that's a question I'd love to ask. Is there anything that us as women can do in almost like the build up to this main event, which is a big event in our life? But anything that we can do in terms, obviously, like you've mentioned there, healthy eating and everything like that. Is there any kind of supplements that we should maybe start at a certain time, or just kind of some tips that maybe we could start implementing that could make the journey a little bit more easier to manage, even if it is like what we've mentioned, meditation, or even journaling as well, being able to record what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the first thing I would say. Number one, track your periods and your symptoms. I have so many clients that come to me for hormone testing, and I need to know specific days that they, where their hormones, where their periods have been over like the last 2 or 3 months. So many women are not tracking their periods. So either, if you like the old fashioned pen and paper, buy a diary or keep notes in your diary of your period dates. And keep notes of your symptoms, whether that's physical symptoms like aches and pains, the length of your period, period pain, and also your emotional symptoms. So put all that down either in a paper diary, or there are so many apps out there for smartphones. Like, I think I use Period Tracker. There's one called Flow. There are so many apps out there. So first of all, track your periods and your symptoms so you can see if your symptoms are hormonal. Start learning. There is so much out there, thankfully, on various social media channels. There's so much information out there that you can start to understand symptoms, what to look out for, understand your hormones. More celebrities are talking out about it now, which I think is a good thing, although the celebrities do tend to be pushing the medical route, which is fine, but just be aware that you can do things naturally as well if you choose to. So listening to your body is key. Diet wise, I'm afraid it's really boring. If you think, it's a bit like thinking of your body like a car. And for most people, we take our car for a service every single year, or an MOT in the UK, whatever we have to do. And they change the oil, they change the filters, whatever they have to do. If you think about it, we're 40, 50 years old, and we've been putting our body, we've been eating loads of sugar, drinking alcohol,
drinking of sugar for sure.
Drinking coffee. I'm a huge coffee addict, but drinking coffee to keep us going, or we like the taste. Adding dairy, some women start to find that they become more intolerant to things like gluten due to the hormone changes that can cause intolerances. So the boring side of it is to basically cut out the rubbish. If we think about, look at the supermarket, what are there are a few aisles full of vegetables and meat and fish, and the rest of it is just colorful packages. So very boring. But if you can, try to get back to cooking, as like when we grew up, it was very much meat and 2 veg. Try and go back to a basic diet or cooking from scratch. Loads of green vegetables is great for you. Fiber, putting in your good fats. Do not be scared of fats. So olive oils, avocados, nuts, seeds. Your oily fishes are amazing. Making sure you're drinking enough water. That's so many women, they will reach the tea, the coffee, but forget the water. Exactly. So things like that. So eating the rainbow. Protein is the biggest thing. Try and eat protein, even if you're a vegetarian or vegan. Look for those sources. Protein with every single meal. Once you start getting into your 40s and 50s, that is key. So that's the boring things. I'm not I think if you read my profile, I absolutely love Prosecco. I love a girls' night. I love cupcakes. That is my thing. I love coffee. So everything in moderation. So that good 80-20% of the rules. So just try and start being mindful about what you're eating. When it comes to supplements, you know, it's a bit of a minefield. Nowadays, our diet is not nutritionally dense. The food that we're eating, the foods that, you know, even the fruit and veg that we're getting in supermarkets, it's just not as nutritionally dense as it would have been 20, 30 years ago when we were growing up, because so much of it is picked before it's ripe, or it's almost put in freezer containers and shipped from various different countries, then kept in freezers or cold storage units in supermarkets before it actually comes onto the shelf and gets to us. So food is not as nutritionally dense as it used to be. Ideally, start, if you can, you know, try and start going more to your local farmers markets for your vegetables. That can help. So we do need to start putting in supplements. You've got your basic ones. So obviously for immune system, vitamin C, vitamin D, they are key. For anyone that's thinking about, you know, the virus that's going around the world, then you might want to add in maybe some zinc, some selenium. They're wonderful for your immune system. But as for women's hormones, vitamin B12 complex, that will help with your brain health. So that's really important, and also with your energy. Women that are struggling with hormonal issues, so maybe a bit of PMS, premenstrual stress or premenstrual tension, breast pain, so breasts starting to get a bit, you know, painful or swollen before their periods, hot flashes, dry skin, then evening primrose can be a really useful remedy, supplement. And you can get those, most of them, you know, from, I would say, if you're buying supplements, try and buy something that's, you know, a little bit pricier if you can afford it. So try and go for quality over cheapness. Women that are struggling to sleep, magnesium's amazing for sleeping, so you could take that in the evening. Also really good for aches and pains.
Right. Okay. I'm writing this down as well.
So there are so many different things you can take. Omegas, your omega oils and fats, they're really important. So yes, you can get them through eating oily fish. Flax seeds as well, you can get your omegas from flax seeds, nuts, seeds. But omega fish oils, or a vegan source of omegas, is really a good one to take for your joints and for your brain health. You know, especially if you're struggling with brain fog, then make sure you've got plenty of omegas in your diet. Then there are herbal remedies as well that can really help. So for example, you've got a herbal remedy called sage. Sage is good for sleep and also for night sweats and hot flashes. For someone that's struggling maybe with the nervous or anxiety moods, sort of like low moods, then maybe a Venus sativa or ashwagandha. CBD oil seems to be quite popular now as well, so the cannabis type oils. But again, make sure you're going for a high quality, you know, otherwise you might as well just eat chalk or so always think about the quality. And then there are other things, like when it comes more specific, it's depending on what's going on with your hormones. You know, I quite often prescribe maca root for some women, or if they've got too much estrogen, then a supplement called DIM is really useful. So it can be quite specific, but they're the basic ones that we do need to add in some supplements. Ideally try and buy them. There are some brands, but just remember that we'll do like a multivitamin for women. Just be mindful that if you're buying cheap, then it is not always the best quality.
And also, I mean, I don't know if I'm right in thinking this, but sometimes if you go for something that is, say, multivitamins as well, you've got to make sure you've got enough amount of each of the supplements, haven't you? Just to make sure that, you know, there's not something that's lacking, that you think, oh, well, if I'm taking this, then I've got enough of that, but it may not be enough that you need.
And that's the guidelines, the government guidelines seem to change quite frequently over what the recommended daily allowance is, or the daily guidelines, and that seems to be lowering. We had to fall in line with Europe a few years back, so it'll be interesting to see what happens now. But don't be too feared. There are some supplements that, you know, you have to be careful not to take too much. But
so there are many women out there who are professionals, who are busy women working a 9 to 5, and who obviously are going through these symptoms. But at work, it's like, okay, how can I talk to my boss about this? How can I manage this at work? Because I am, I've noticed that, the brain fog is coming in, and the mood swings. And it's like, how can someone still be as productive at work? I guess it's a two-part question. Continue being productive at work the best way that they can, but as well as being able to have that conversation with their manager about what they're going through. Have you got any tips for any of these women that could be listening to this podcast?
Yeah, it is a real issue, Rita. I have so many clients that have either left their job due to finding, maybe due to the brain fog, concentration.
Yeah.
Other women that suddenly just overnight, they could be doing, I had one lady that was doing accounts, and then she just sat at her computer screen one day with this anxiety, couldn't remember how to do her accounts.
Yeah.
So it can become a real issue. And then the hot flashes during, they could be doing a presentation, and due to the stress of the presentation, that can also cause the hot flashes. So it's not just a hormonal issue. So it can become embarrassing, and many women feel that they can't take on the projects or have to step down. The biggest thing to do is be mindful and understand your hormones. That's where, if you're tracking your period cycle and tracking your symptoms, that can play a huge part. So even I find now that, a few days before my period, I'm just not as productive. My brain just doesn't work, and I just want to rest. Think back to, I don't know, caveman days. The women would probably go off into the women's circles. The women would go off, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And just be alone. Whereas, like you say, nowadays we're working the 9 to 5 plus everything else we have to do. So by tracking your periods, you might start to notice that maybe the week before your period, you're not as productive. So you can go into your diary and think, it's not the week before your period is not the time to be taking on a new project, a new presentation, or going business networking. You want to save that for after your period, when you've got more energy coming back, and particularly around, ovulation is the time that you are on fire, that you can bash out those work projects. So think about that. If you can track your periods, you'll start to notice when you're more productive and when you just want to rest and sleep. And then find, more and more companies now, especially the larger companies, do have a wellness department, or speak to their HR, speak to their manager, and say what they're going through and what support they need. So it may be that, if work's becoming a little bit more flexible now, maybe that they need to work from home on certain days. Just seeing, you have to speak up and say what you're struggling with. Maybe you need a bit longer, maybe you need less pressure, but as long as you're getting your work done, but just be mindful. Maybe you need to, I'm somebody that works better in the evenings. So thinking about, could your work day change slightly so you could do more at home? Just speak to somebody about your wellness and see how you can think about your productivity levels and how they can accommodate that. I mean, I have had women that have gone on performance management type, or they've been put under performance management, and they may have, a 50-year-old woman that's struggling due to her menopause symptoms, and she's got a 25-year-old telling her that she's not performing, and that's just putting further stress on her. So it's speaking up. And the good thing is, there's many charities in the UK that are really starting to push this, and menopause is being spoken about in the workplace and in the government. So it is changing. It's just finding somebody within your company, organisation, that you can speak to about how you're feeling. But the biggest tip I would say is to think about your period cycle. When are you less productive? When are you more productive? Could you start work earlier in the day if you're someone that's waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning? How can your work fit around you a little bit better?
Okay. So in terms of if there is, say, a manager that's listening, what would you, and then they're basically unsure as to, okay, well, they know about this, but they don't know how to approach it with their team or with a particular person. Have you got any kind of just some small tips that as a manager, what's the best way to talk about this and let women know that, you know, they can come to them, or what they should be looking out for? Because I know probably some managers are on edge, you know, that they think, okay, I know about this, I know around the time, but how can I manage it so that I still get that productivity from my employee? Have you got any kind of tips there? I know that's the sort of an out there kind of question, because obviously focusing on the woman going through it.
Yeah, it is, and it's for the managers out there, it is again educating themselves a little bit about hormones, even men. Just understanding that some of the main symptoms that women are going to struggle with at work. And it can be, for women at work, it tends to be either anxiety suddenly kicks in over the most silly things. Maybe they're a little bit more emotional, tearful if they're told they've done something wrong, or on the other end of the scale, maybe they're getting a little bit, you know, rage might come out if, you know, someone in their team's not done the right thing. So just being mindful that women's emotions can be a little bit erratic. My brain fog's kicking in now. So, and also that's it, concentration. So thinking, are they getting fatigued? Are they tired? You know, are they less productive in the afternoon? So understanding what women may go through. So there tends to be sort of the main symptoms. So it could be emotional, stress, anxiety, and hot flashes. You know, that can be an embarrassing situation. So putting women in, you know, thinking about the climate of your office can be important. And and concentration and fatigue. You know, do the women need to go and have longer for lunch or start earlier in the day? Maybe they need to take their laptop home and work in the mornings before they come into work, or work in the evenings, or maybe at weekends, being more flexible. But the more that a manager can understand the key symptoms to look out for, and then it could be, rather than just if they're worried about approaching the employee direct, you know, it may be that they can send out an email in general, so that it will be sent around the office, and so that everybody is a little bit more mindful of the symptoms, and that they can feel. It could be that a manager, especially if it's a male manager, maybe they need to find a woman in the workplace, whether it's in HR or someone that's wellness, that they can go to and feel confident that they can speak to about their symptoms. So many women struggle as well to speak to. I mean, many women don't even speak to their husbands, so they're not going to go and speak to a male manager. So maybe it's finding a woman in the workplace that can just be a coordinator that they can go to. Because it can be, you know, if you're feeling rubbish and you're feeling that you're not being productive at work, and then you have a male manager that you have to go and speak to, that's going to make you even more stressed or tearful. So if there can be a middle person that people feel confident, that can really help.
No, that sounds great. And I think, you know, you've mentioned it there. I guess knowledge is the key here, is that the more all of us can increase our knowledge on, you know, menopause, perimenopause, it will actually help us all be more productive and be aware that, okay, you know what, between let's change your hours, or, you know, and become aware of what changes you could make. And I guess really the key word here is being flexible as well.
Definitely.
You know?
Yeah, flexibility is the key.
Yeah. So have you got any last minute tips that you'd like to share with the audience that they can take away and not only think about, but also be, you know, able to just, because obviously you've shared amazing tips already, but is there any final tips that you've got?
Yeah, there are just final tips. So just think about, if you are going to the doctors and the doctor is saying that you're too young, when it just something quickly, when it comes to hormone tests, blood tests do not show enough information in the early perimenopause. So with a blood test, that's why quite often the results come back normal.
Right.
So blood tests do not always work. I use a Dutch hormone test, which is a urine test, which works really well with perimenopause women. So that's something, if you go to the doctors and they're telling you they won't do a blood test, or that blood test results are normal, then that could be why, because in the early stages it just doesn't show enough information. So that's one tip, but always trust your symptoms, trust your body, track your symptoms is key, emotional and physical symptoms, and start to ask for help, put boundaries in place. Obviously we spoke a little bit about work, but then think about your home life as well. So as you say, so many women work the 9 to 5 now, then they come home, maybe they have to walk the dog, look after the children, or look after elderly, or stress about their parents. It's very much a time of transition. Maybe they're struggling in relationships. It's time to start asking for help. As women, we do everything quite often. The weight of our do. And the weight of the world is on our shoulders. And it's time to start saying, actually, I need some help. You know, children, I need some help doing the dishwasher. Husband, partner, I need some help. Can someone walk the dog? I need to rest. And that's where it's really important. If you can understand your period cycles, you're going to know when you need to rest. So it may be the time around your period. You need to just take it easy. And that's where you need to ask family, colleagues, friends to just step up and support you. That is the key. So put some boundaries in place where you need help, ask for help, and rest. Take that time to rest. If you need to rest, your body is telling you to take some time out. Don't go out doing that high impact aerobics class because you feel you've got to. That's the worst thing to do if you're absolutely exhausted. Do some yoga, or sit and watch telly and, you know, chill, watch Netflix. Bring some fun back into your life. That's the other thing. I think most of us have struggled. There is not enough fun in our life over the last 18 months as it is. But going forward, perimenopause, menopause years, if you're struggling with low mood, anxiety, inject some fun into your life. So think about what you really want to do. Go out and be playful. Watch stuff on telly that makes you laugh. That's really important too.
Yeah, definitely. That feel good factor is so
absolutely
important. Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the things that you said there was definitely about talking about it. We as women, you know, we feel, okay, I've got this emotional thing happening to me, but, you know, I can't talk about it. I've got to deal with it myself, you know, and especially like you mentioned also earlier about, you know, if you're not feeling comfortable talking to your husband about it, or any male person, then we keep it in. But it's so important that when we're talking about it, we're also educating men who don't know and they need to know about it. So the more we talk about it, the more we're helping others understand, as well as other women understand it a bit more. Because if no one spoke about perimenopause, or even us having this conversation, I wouldn't know half of what I've learned today in this podcast. And there's so much information that's come out since, you know, within the last year or so that's new, that I always thought, okay, menopause was at the end and it was a period. You know, I remember when I was doing the 9 to 5 and women were having a choice of whether to take hormone tablets or not, and they were getting hot flushes, and I thought that was it. I didn't realize how much. But, you know, that was my first kind of connection to it, because they were talking about it then. So much has come out. And I think the more we talk and let out our emotions and let out how we're feeling, I think that's definitely going to help us.
And sometimes if you're one of those people that feels that they can't speak out, then it makes you, because quite often speaking out our problems makes us emotional. When it comes to dealing, you know, telling your partner, your husband, or, you know, maybe your manager at work, is there a way that you can write it down?
That's
and
true.
You know, put that way across. That can sometimes be easier.
Yeah, no, definitely. Kat, this has been interesting, and I could ask more questions after more questions, but I want to leave it there so that if anyone who's listening has got any questions that they want to ask you, or is concerned about are they going through perimenopause or not, that they can contact you, reach out to you, and possibly maybe do a hormone test with yourself and get the consultation. So where can our listeners go to find out more about you and the service that you offer?
Okay, so on social media, You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at the Hormone Fairy. And I have a website as well, so it's www.thehormonefairy.co.uk, and I'm happy to answer questions. There are loads of tips on my social media. There's also a Facebook group. You're welcome to come and join us there for more questions and tips and advice.
Brilliant. You've been amazing, and I'm sure many women are going to enjoy listening to this and will gain a lot of information from this one podcast. So thank you for being my special guest today.
Thank you for having me, Rita.
You're welcome. Well, that's it for today, guys and gals. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you next time. Bye. I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned for more tips, motivation, and of course inspiration coming up real soon. If you want to email me and send me messages of what you thought of the show or anything you'd love me to cover on the show, please email me at coachrita@swasthialiving.com. Swasthia Living is SwasthyaLiving.com. See you real soon. Bye.